But now so at this point, I really want us to focus on state issues. We kind of got that out of our system, and now we're going to talk about the state. So this worked out perfectly. So here's the introduction. Representative Robert Reives II has all of Chatham and a bit of Randolph County in his District 54 in the State House. He's also the minority leader of the North Carolina House of Representatives, and we hope someday he'll be the majority.
Yeah.
Or the governor.
Or anything else he wants to be.
Yeah, anything else.
Senator Natalie Murdock, who all of you don't know as well as you know Robert, because he's been around with us longer. She has all of Chatham and a lot of Durham County in her District 20 in the Senate. The thing about her is she not only cares about all the issues that we do, like public education and healthcare, and including women's reproductive rights and gerrymandering, but as far as I can tell, she can also describe the legislative history and legislative prospects of all of those issues and more. We've asked them to talk briefly about their work in the General Assembly and what's on the horizon, but mostly we want them to hear about what's on your minds. What do you want to know or suggest or express an opinion about? And I wrote, and you can see why, I don't think we need to dwell on the horrendous things that are happening at the federal government. To use our time, mostly we should stipulate that it's awful and focus on our state. So now we welcome Representative Reives and Senator Murdock.
Sees you.
No, you start. Yeah, but I'm looking at the eyes.
No, I love it. I love it. And honestly, I do hate that I missed the end of what you all were discussing. I do think it's best to start at the state level. But I will admit the conversation for those of you that are on social media, Natalie FORNC on all platforms. And I did post like a summary of what could happen as a result of last night's actions on my Instagram page. And wait for it, I have over 5,000 responses to that one post. And so I want to segue into that because what you will see me do a lot of as a legislator in another life, actually both of us, Governor Stein had a reception. So that's why, thank you for your patience, was leaving that reception to get here just to open up session. But I was his deputy communications director. So I just have a knack for trying to take very complex topics and making them feel really simple. Understandably, folks are overwhelmed. And so it'd be a balance of kind of breaking down what these things could mean, preference on the word could, because as you've seen, we've already had judicial action that quickly. So a lot of this will still have to play out in court. Thank goodness for us. There are still folks that really meant that oath that they took to uphold the law and the Constitution. So a lot of this will play out in the courts. But understandably, we get calls, emails, and requests. So as soon as we get the information, we'll push it out. So and I'll make sure you all get my information. When you do follow me on not only social media, but even my newsletter, sometimes this is what we know at this time, but it literally could change in a matter of hours. Yeah. Just to be responsive. I do have the Research Triangle Park in my district, along with Duke Healthcare System. So in real time, we did have researchers, folks that are RTI that were very concerned. So did just want to preface with, we're not tone deaf. We understand that sentiment, it does impact the work that we do at the state, but to transition, thank you for the introduction. Honored to be here with all of you. For those of you that I haven't met, Natalie Murdock, I have been in the Senate since 2020. I think it was maybe around 2 years ago through redistricting, picked up all of Chatham County. Woo! So I'm thrilled to work with all of you. Luckily for me, I already got to work with Leader Reives because he had a portion of Durham County that overlaps with my district. And so this is our second time around getting to be colleagues, where he was on the other side of things, where he's having a great time in Chatham County. And they say, guess what? You got some of Durham. Now we get to switch, where they say, guess what? You pick up an entire county. But Honored to represent all of you. Hopefully your ears are ringing, brag all the time of just what an amazing community you are. I'll be back. I'll be going to the State of the City for Siler City this coming Thursday. Was just doing some, I was at another event in Pittsburgh for MLK. So I definitely try to get here as much as I possibly can. And as far as session in the Senate, we're not in the same position as the House. We are still in the super minority. We were short by 1 seat as a result of the extreme gerrymandering. I would argue we have some of the worst maps in the nation if you really look at what the maps we should have versus what we do have. I'll specifically mention the seat in Wilmington, North Carolina. I have tons of family out there. As soon as I saw those new maps, I knew how bad those gerrymanders were. A lot of those majority precincts were moved to a deep red seat. So the competitive seat that we used to have is still competitive, but not as competitive as it would have been had they not engaged in that extreme gerrymandering by splitting up Wilmington. So when I first entered the Senate, we did have 22 members because we had that Hoke County, Cumberland County seat. And then we also had the Wilmington seat. So that's how we went from 22 to now 20. So that means we do not have the ability to uphold vetoes in the Senate, but we are still going to hold strong. The positive is we were able to hold the seat for Northwake County and Granville County that's now held by Senator Terrence Everett, who in the House was also in a competitive seat. Thank goodness for him. I can't stress enough, he did not have to run. He did not have to run, but he gets it and won by a few hundred votes, less than 200. Same for another seat out of Mecklenburg County. So say that to say we could have gone down to 18. So I'm not complaining about us being 20. So we're still 1 seat away. And there's still a lot of power that we can have. I think I'll highlight from last session to kind of bring it full circle, the power you do have in the super minority when you hold together. There's still a number of bills, please, for folks that aren't aware, there are times when the majority party does want bipartisan bills. They don't like those party line votes all the time, even though they can do it, even if they can pick off 2-3 Democrats, they want that. And so there was a possibility that casinos, in addition to Medicaid expansion, was going to be thrown together in one bill. We held together. I know, like, who comes up with these things? And no transparency whatsoever. Literally in the heat of the night, like all the fears you have of those deals cut in smoke-filled rooms is exactly what that could say. No public hearings. Casinos were just up here. So even local communities were upset about that, but we held together as a Senate caucus, wrote a letter saying we're not going to play any parts in you playing games with folks' healthcare, expand Medicaid and the clean bill. Casinos have nothing to do with folks getting their healthcare. And we won. We won. Politics makes for strange bedfellows. Even the Freedom Caucus folks in the House said, we don't like this either, quietly behind the scenes. And we held firm and we got Medicaid expansion without casinos. So that is one example of there are times, yes. It took over 10 years. We finally were able to extend Medicaid and a little bit more of a number of the issues I work on. I'm thrilled to finally be on the healthcare committee this year. I actually have 2 healthcare systems in my district. So Duke Health, I was just with them last week. We had a huge announcement today. Duke and UNC are banding together to build one huge children's hospital that I believe will be the best in the nation once it's built. We are thrilled about it. It is just a children's hospital. So as you all know, in Siler City, there is a small UNC hospital. And then Duke Health is on the Duke side. Obviously, you all go back and forth and utilize UNC. So it was very important to me to get on the healthcare committee. I do a lot of work with maternal health issues, disparities in healthcare. My mom was a registered nurse, so I'm very passionate about public health issues and our public health departments. So thrilled to be on healthcare. I'm still on ag, energy, and environment, transportation, finance, appropriations-based budget. I think those are all the ones I got added. This is the most I've had this time around. And I think approach for transportation So really excited to be a part of those committees and also have a new leadership role. As you can tell, I have a gift for gab, so I'm deputy leader for communication for the Senate caucus as well. So that's why I wanted to lead with a little bit of the communications piece. We really want to be bolder with our communications from social media to radio, in addition to TV, and speak from one unified message. We hear you all loud and clear. We've got to do a better job with our messaging, and we are going to do everything we can to make sure folks not only are getting information, but feeling empowered to do something about it. And when they're confused, to kind of demystify, because you will see that strategy of so much coming at you one day, it's hard to find out what to focus on. So we really want to be laser focused on the things that we can actually impact here at the state level. So will it be a tough session? Absolutely. But back to projects like at Children's Hospital, there will be some amazing things that we can do for the state. Each year, I've seen it every session that I've been there. You got to take the good with the bad, and they're always by far, Medicaid expansion was the highlight of last session. So there always is something big that we are able to achieve for the state of North Carolina. So here, I'm an honor to have the support of all of you, and want to continue to work with you for the biennium.
Yeah.
Good evening, everybody. My report might not be as cheery, so.
I have a problem.
But it's good to be here. I really enjoyed obviously representing Chatham, because that's the only thing that stay consistent in my districts. I'm enjoying the fact that I just, see, what was it? I guess it was last week, that finished my 11th year in the House representing Chatham.
Wow.
I see my colonel there in the back, Ms. Davis, thank you. And she brought the first group up from Farrington right after I got appointed, and it's just, we always called her the colonel, because I mean, every time a group came from Farrington when she had them those years, it was just like, we're here, this is what we got going on, this is what we got to do. Does anybody have any questions? You, no, you're not gonna get asked a question, we're out. And she was always good at that, and I really appreciate all that support. And I appreciated the support here, because you guys have stayed engaged, stayed enthused, and it's funny, you know, when Natalie was talking about bragging on Chatham, you know I brag on Chatham, because, you know, my thing is, as soon as I say Chatham, it's just like, yeah, I know, y'all led the state again, whatever, and I'm just like, yeah. But what's always fun is when I get into these discussions, like we had our caucus retreat yesterday. And so people try to start talking about, this is what voters care about, this is what they're doing, and I'm just like, yeah, I'd like to say I got what you call an informed electorate. And so I am fairly confident if these are the things they're saying they care about, I'll bet you there's a modicum of truth to that. So let's retreat and do, because one of the things that I think that you've seen in politics generally is a lot of people not listening what people are trying to tell them. And that has probably been my biggest frustration when working in the General Assembly, is because, you know, some are doing that because they don't care what you got to say. Some are doing that because it's hard for them to fathom, because, you know, just like you guys know, there are tons of things going on in the world and in this country that just, you know, you're in shock. I mean, in all seriousness, if you are over 25 years old, you are in shock. Because, you know, just like there's no way this stuff is happening. Like I always pick, some of you know I was a comic book collector and all that kind of stuff. And I laugh so much because, and the reason I'm thinking about it right now, I was on the phone with my daughter. She has finished her first day at work. She's at college now. So, unlike me, my first day at work, she came home and she's like, what a great day. And I was like, I've never been happy. It's pretty amazing.
Yay.
But she was talking about it. And so one of the things that she with the job she has, she works on housing design, things of that sort. And so she said, you know, we had something I know you're gonna love, and the guy at the comic book room, and we were talking about this and this amazing thing. And the reason I bring that up in terms of politics, because I will always remember the Superman comic where Lex Luthor became president. And And I mean,
Fresh.
I
Oh,
remember
yeah.
all of us sitting there when that happened and say, well, Superman jumped the shark. That's ridiculous. How could Lex Luthor ever become president? I'm not saying Lex is president. But I'm just saying that it was really interesting to see some of the themes in a comic book. And then to see some of those themes play out, because I mean, a lot of the things that were being attacked, then of course you put it in terms of aliens, and that was the whole thing with Superman. He's an alien and he's coming here to, invade us and cause all this harm and all this. And it's just, if you read history, you look at all the things that have gone throughout history that you just thought you'd never see again. I watched today where there was a discussion about telling certain companies to stop certain practices within their own companies that weren't just not, illegal practices. They were practices that we were literally encouraging people to do for the last 30 years. And then you hear the federal government telling people not to do these things and threatening them if they continue to do these things. I was just like, I own a business. And I was like, I cannot imagine a world where somebody comes to my business and say, hey, this is who you're going to hire. This is how you're going to hire. This is what you're going to do. These are the things you're going to focus on. And yeah, you might lose some money, but whatever. So I bring those things up to say, I won't get into all the federal craziness, but the reason it matters is because it affects completely what we're going to be doing at the state level. So the big issue that we're going to have this biennium is figuring out how to pay for all of the damage out west. And that is a more massive issue than you can really absorb because of all the other craziness that's going on. Like immediately the LA fires happen and you really haven't even heard anybody talking on the national stage about what's happening out west.
Yeah.
That is the most expensive natural disaster in the history of this state. And it's in a place that is not built for natural disasters. And that's what makes it more relevant. It is that down east, you don't want to have a disaster anywhere. But down east, they know flooding. They know hurricanes, they know what happens, and they've kind of got almost built-in protections. They've got a way to go. Like I was talking to one of our employees, and they talked about the fact that they were just like, look, when X happens, we know that we got to get the boats out. When this happens, we know we got to do this. And you hate to live like that, but you know it. You never expect that in the mountains. And the reason that's relevant is because immediately after that, you're hearing, possible changes in FEMA. And, we've got to get that money. And so that affects you immediately because there's $59 billion worth of damage out there, which exceeds our whole budget for biennium. We got $31 billion budget. And so your question is, where does the money come from? And we're going to figure that out. But what we've got to be careful of, and again, why I bring up the federal stage, is because when you see all this bombastic stuff happening that gets your attention, there's something else going on. That's what you got to be careful about. And that's what my concern is. Just like you heard about this casino deal. The reason casinos got tied to Medicaid is because we're out of money. We have cut our revenue sources to a point where we can't pay for the things we've actually got to do. And to me, that's one of those basic common sense things that you know from growing up. Like for those of you that grew up like I grew up and maybe live like I live, there's X amount of money that's got to get paid no matter what. That house payment's probably gonna have to get paid. That car payment, if you got it, that's got to get paid. Your power bill is gonna have to be paid. You don't get options on that. They don't say, you know what, we decided we didn't want to work as much. So we're going to keep the house, but we're not going to pay you for it. And that's what we're doing when we cut our revenue sources. We're saying we're not going to continue to collect money and we're just going to figure out something to pay for this other stuff. And casinos became the answer last time. And, when you think that one through, we're literally saying that the way to take care of our recurring expenses is by gambling. That's literally what you tell people not to do. Just like, and so that's it. And that's gonna come back up this year. But you're also going to hear it in the guise of what we've got to do to pay for the recovery. Recovery money we're going to be able to make happen. What we've got to do is pay for the expenses we've already got. So that's an okie doke, as we used to call it, that you don't want to fall for. Another thing that's coming up are video lottery terminals. And again, it's not about how you feel about casinos or how you feel about video lottery terminals, but they can't be the basis for your budget. That is my whole point. And so, I know that this, goes out, and I know that people will hear it and things that understand. I'm not taking a position on what anybody wants to do or what kind of business wants to get here. I'm just saying there are things I can depend on and things I can't depend on. I can depend on Wolf Speed's gonna pay their taxes, and based on that, I can base a budget. I can't depend on whether or not we're gonna do $100 million in gambling this week, or if everybody decides to stay home. We don't have that option, and so that is a big problem. Another problem that I think we're gonna run into eventually is we got to fix the education problem. And let me tell you why, because I think that the public education has become such a partisan issue. And, and it's been placed in front of you beautifully. It starts talking about school choice and things of that sort. As if you've got to pick one over the other. You don't have to pick one or the other. But the problem that you're running into is something that I'm concerned about, for instance, in Golston. In Golston, in Bennett, and some of these other places, Bennett's really about the best example. You've got schools that now have whole classes equaling about 40 or 50 people. If you keep taking away those students and putting them in other places, suddenly community schools are gone. And when you get rid of your community schools, you're starting to get rid of your communities.
Yeah.
And that means a lot. Like where we stay right now, a lot of that house was built by my wife's great grandfather. Her family had lived, in that area for generations. Those families that they've grown up with have been there for generations. That's how we identify. That's, kind of one of the great things about me being from Sanford, her being from Chatham, is that we could always talk about, when my daughter finally started dating, you could immediately start asking what's the lineage. Your granddad. We're good. But you get rid of communities. And the other thing that you do when you're getting rid of communities, which is something that people pay more attention to than you believe when you're recruiting employees, but you get rid of your workforce ability. Because if you don't have a good K through 12 system, you cannot prepare people for the jobs that we're bringing in. And that seems like that should be common sense, but that's gone away. Because the thing is, you can't educate everybody in a private school. There's no way around it. I mean, you just can't do it. But you can't fill all the jobs with the kids that you're getting educated in private schools. You've got a lot of these jobs. This isn't, years ago where you could really get out here and you could have, like my grandfather, you could have a 5th grade education and get out here and actually make a living and send 6 kids to college. You've got to at least have a K through 12 so you can then get the technical expertise to be able to do a job. And we really run ourselves into a gap. We've had the biggest economic boom in the history of this state over the last 5 years. And now we're turning around and we're not providing workforce training. It's coming. Wolfspeed's not even up and running yet. And we've already started trying to gut their workforce. What does that tell companies that are going to come here 5 years from now? These guys are going to pull the rug. We need to go somewhere else. And the thing you don't think about when you think of jobs is if you get jobs like Wolfspeed, it's not about whether you're going to go work at Wolfspeed, but that raises everybody's level of pay. Because now that person that was getting ready to make $30,000 over here, if they can go over to Wolfspeed and make $60,000, and whoever was paying them 30 over here is going to have to raise that level of pay. That raises the level of everybody in the community. That makes us all do well. And again, that's something we got to get back to. And that's something that's really been on my mind for the last couple of months is where did that go? Where did it become that we became a society that is so afraid that we're going to do something that might help somebody else? Just might help somebody else.
Okay.
That we'd rather just burn the whole place down rather than take the chance that that neighbor over there might actually get a good job one day. And we've got to do for self-preservation, we got to get rid of that mindset because in my mind, what's going to come down to, it's not going to be about party. It's not going to be about what political bent you have. It's going to be the states that figure out, this stuff isn't working. This fighting in the middle of the news and this talking heads and all this stuff. We've got to learn how to govern again. And the states that figure out how to just govern again are going to be the states that thrive. And the states that keep on this, everything's going to become a partisan issue, are going to be, and even things that you would think would be common sense suddenly aren't common sense anymore. Those states are going to fall because people can go other countries now. I mean, think about how easy that is. I mean, it used to be your kid get out of school and, they have to think about somewhere on the East Coast if they're from here. They're not even think about necessarily what, they think about going to California, like, oh my God. But now, a child could easily get out of school and say, I've got a good job offer in Ireland, which some of my daughter's friends already have.
Wow.
Cool.
I've got a kid that was working for me on my campaign that is now working in England on an AI project, and he's already making more money than I'm probably ever gonna make it per year, which I'm glad for. I wish you could adopt me, but I'm glad. But those are the options that are out there. So we're going to thrive. That's what we've got to do. And so those are the focuses that we've got to have this session, is to spend smartly, invest well in our people, invest well in our communities, and to try to pull ourselves out of the craziness that we're seeing right now. So look forward to hearing any questions you guys have got, but it's gonna be a one road for the next couple of years.
So I forgot to say that the people who are on Zoom can type their questions into the chat and one of us will read it
Can
out.
they see us here?
Yeah, they can see.
They can see you
I think
there.
those eyes-
Yeah, they're looking at you.
Yeah.
Back to-
No, shout out no, literally, shout out to Anderson. I'll say, hey, Zoomies. It's playing, he says.
Tina has the microphone. You can let her spot the hands.
Okay.
She'll just, somebody will start talking to you and that's it.
Okay.
So raise hands if you want.
Okay, how about
And,
this?
oh, wait, I thought of one other thing to say. We usually say, don't make a speech, just ask your question. And this is the opposite. You don't have to ask a question. You can just tell them what's on your mind.
A brief speech.
Free speech, yeah.
Freeze me.
Brief,
You can hear
brief.
this.
Yeah. Somebody complains about here.
Robert, I heard that there was quite a large rainy day fund. What is the rainy day fund and how can it be used and could it be used for relief for the western part of our state?
I smile just because you would think a rainy day fund was for a literal rainy day. We found out in November it was. So yes, that is what the rainy day fund is supposed to be for. It's supposed to be for if we had a recession and had to dip in. If we have a disaster, we've got an immediate resource. And candidly, I'm not in the majority. I don't control it. I have no concept of what it could be for at this point, because we haven't used it to try to supplement expenses. We have not used it for disaster relief. So I have no idea what we got it there for, but that's what it's supposed to be there for. That's what we were told when we created it.
Cause it was what, at 6 billion?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was at 6 billion, because the other piece though, and I really hope folks are following, and I say this as, so North Carolina native, was born and raised in Greensboro, North Carolina. But my first kind of Durham interaction since I went to UNC Chapel Hill, my last year of school was in Durham, and then my first job was in Chapel Hill, but lived in Durham, but then lived in Asheville for 5 years. And I, at one point, worked for all 28 counties out west. So I want to preface with, when I tell you my heart goes out to Western North Carolina, I'm preparing myself for what I'm physically going to see when I get out there. But at the last session, knowing that we have the $6 billion, that last vote was monopoly money. So it was, I think, 270 some odd million was not truly appropriated. So back to the rainy day, if Hurricane Helene isn't a rainy day, I don't know what is. So even though we lived into it, it wasn't nearly what we should have spent with, even though now the person is saying they're going to get rid of FEMA, it is a reimbursement process. And so you keep all your receipts of everything. And so that money could have been given to folks that needed it the most before Christmas to save some of these businesses, to help folks that don't even have flood insurance. Why would you live on the top of a mountain and think that you need flood insurance? So even in areas that are flatter, a lot of folks don't have flood insurance. You definitely don't see it in the mountains. Have an ag background, don't even get me started on the farms. I mean, you have farms that there is no topsoil. So a lot of your apples come from Henderson County, North Carolina. So at any rate, we can't do it on our own. But with the rainy day fund, you're going to see that be a theme for this session. And the Senate, more than I think what most folks pay attention to, a lot of our leadership leans towards the West, which is why I had to lead with how, quite frankly, criminal it was that they didn't step up to the plate and do more last session. But some of our top leaders in the Senate are out West. Some of the areas that have been ravaged the most, those are the areas they represent. So they have alluded to, at least in the Senate side of things, I don't know about the House, that we're going to have to build an even greater rainy day fund. So, but there's a number of things going on. Back to that Medicaid casino example, it's not to be fiscally responsible, because it's not fiscally responsible to reduce personal income tax, zero out corporate income tax, and say we're going to fix it with casinos. That's not fiscally responsible or fiscally conservative. So they know they want to lower taxes anyway and supplant it with casinos. So now, to justify what I think is going to happen, cutting services that we need, education, transportation, a number of things, say, oh, it's because we need a larger rainy day fund. So we're going to spend less. Because if something really bad happens, maybe we need a $10 billion rainy day fund, maybe we need 15, who knows what the number is, but they've definitely foreshadowed they actually want the rainy day fund to grow even more, which I think will equate to even fewer services for the state of North Carolina, and back to paying bills of things that have to be paid for, giving them further justification for things like the casinos and the gaming and things of that sort, to completely restructure our revenue model here in North Carolina. And quite frankly, to put it on the backs of folks that don't have a lot of means through your sales tax and gambling and things like that.
I guess the thing I'm struggling with a little bit, Tony Carroll, is how to get people to understand the impacts of some of these fairly abstract problems. And one of them that Sue Blaylock sort of mentioned, little light went off in my mind, was basically that as the state cuts back on funding to the county, not only do we do sales taxes, which is regressive but very hard to understand, but real estate taxes go up, and there's I think a pretty substantial segment of Chatham County old-time residents that are feeling land poor because the value of their properties goes up. That doesn't necessarily mean that taxes go up, but there's nowhere else to get the money. So is that something you think can be explained to people to get them a little more excited about voting for Democrats?
I mean, what I would tell you is this, is that a lot of this information can be done. It takes self-regulation. And that's something, you know, since you have brought it up in terms of Democrats.
Yeah.
Because I know that, you know, it's a town hall where in a nonpartisan space, but I think.
Have you been drinking?
Would you like?
I'm telling you, every time I'm in here, somebody's like, remember, we got lots of folks here, so. Okay, well, since you want me to cut loose about it, here's the problem. And it's just as simple. We've got to get over ourselves at times.
Yes.
And that has been a huge issue with us. It is hard. It is so hard when you are trying to persuade a voter who really has not made up their mind, who is really determined, look, you guys look all the same to me. Yeah, this is just a bunch of people talking to me. My life doesn't change or anything like that, who don't have, this is what I go back to our workforce. You don't have K through 12, you can't do the technical expertise. If you don't have basic civics, I can't even get you over here.
Yeah.
And so what happens is we're talking to people as if they have not just had the K through 12 of basic civics, but they have had the 4 years of basic civics, and then they've gotten the master's and PhD of basic civics. And then we're talking to them about this issue over here. And what we've got to learn is, what is it you're worried about? And that when a person tells you that what I'm worried about is I just went to the grocery store and the eggs were $7, you cannot start talking to them about inflation and everything else, because I am telling, and this is not denigrating anybody's intelligence. This is because this person's focus is singular.
Yes.
And we have created a society where attention spans are this.
Yeah.
You know, Walter Cronkite wouldn't survive today. You know, and Walter Cronkite, yeah, I love it. This is not a knock against him, but I'm telling you, when I watch my son watching YouTube, a YouTube clip and a TV show and talking on the phone at the same time. And then they've moved on to 15 different things before you've even caught up. You've got to be able to say quickly, this is what the problem is. And that's where we've got to get better about what is it that you care about, and this is how it's affected. So what you really got to think about it as an attorney, one of the most horrific things I ever went through was the bar exam. But because you got to take all of your schooling and be ready for whatever part of the last 3 years they ask you about. But that's really what we've got to do if we're going to be really good ambassadors about what's going on. And so we've got to be able to tell folks immediately, as soon as they say it, quickly, this is how this is affected.
So can you give us some soundbite?
No. That's not part of it, but we got to get better at it.
Yeah.
But seriously, what we got to do is explain to them what's going on, and it's going to take a sea change, because what you got to understand is this, is that, and I hate picking on Fox News, that's an easy booger, but in all seriousness, this has been droning for 20 years. And you're hearing it. I mean, when I tell you you're hearing it constantly, I don't go to a mechanic shop. I don't go to a small restaurant. I took my son on a college tour last week. There was only one news station on. And even if this is just going in the background, you start to believe.
Yeah. I
I use the example all the time of when they re-switched our district. And so they made it a 1-point Democratic district as opposed to it before like 14-point district. So they had $1 million to spend to get me out of office, which is fine. I mean, that's part of the game. But if you, those of you that remember the flyers, they sent flyers constantly about gas and about raising per diem. And I was going out to talk to people, and they're like, well, we understand why you want to be able to get more money in gas. I'm like, no, I never did it. But they're just like, they've heard it so much, they're like, well, it's got to be something to it.
Yeah.
But we're telling you, we got your back anyway, even though you're a greedy politician. And so that's what's happening right now. So we're trying to get them back to there. But that takes an effort on everybody's part. And it takes patience, it takes understanding, and the biggest thing it takes is no judgment. Because the minute somebody feels like you're being judgmental of them because they asked the question, they stop listening to you and they stop asking those questions, but somebody's going to talk to them. So we've got to get better, and no, I'm not better at it either, because but if I know, I do think the one thing I have learned how to do is if you ask me something and just say, look, this is what I'm concerned about. I do try to break it down and say, here's basically why it's happening and why it affects you. And that's what we've got to start doing better. But when you walk into somebody like, there's some people right now, and I actually had this conversation, I don't mind saying, the DNC's getting ready to elect the new chairman. And so I didn't realize I was a delegate until 2 weeks ago. I got that through, but I didn't get it through North Carolina, I actually got it through the LCC. So I got the calls, and I was talking to one of the chair candidates today, and we talked about the same thing, is that all of us are worried because democracy is being destroyed. That's a real thing. Like the reason that we're scared about the Jefferson Griffin recount right now is because we know what happens if it gets to the Supreme Court that funded his race to get him on the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
What we're depending on is that Supreme Court that funded this guy's race to get him on the Supreme Court is going to say, we're going to be really objective.
Yeah.
And you haven't got that faith in the institutions. And so what happens is that we know that democracy is tearing down, but a person out here working every day doesn't have time to worry about that judge, because that judge doesn't make, and it's true. Jefferson Griffin gets on, it doesn't reduce any of those expenses that I've got tomorrow. It doesn't change the due date of any of my bills. It doesn't change my ability not to be able to buy a house. Nothing changes for me if he gets in office. So I can't get to democracy until you tell me how to fix what's going on today. And that's what we got to get better at.
Yes. And until you tell him why it will make a difference if that guy is the judge. That's the thing, because it will, they just don't think.
Oh, no, it will, but but that's
So
it.
you
gotta
say,
get-
this is how it makes a difference, but that wasn't my point.
Oh, but I do want to quickly stick on that, because back to DNC strategy, We could talk messaging all day, but to stick on the judges, what we did get right as a party, and which is why I would argue that the Justice Riggs race was as close as it was, because as you know, nationally, Democrats did not have the best night, but North Carolina held better than even Michigan and Pennsylvania and a lot of these other states. But having, for folks that are neighbors on call, as we all know, Becca went to full-time focus just on judicial races. Same for flippancy. As Dems, we do have to make judicial races sexy again, things that people care about. But back to that culture change, we dropped the ball, and we have to own, we got outmaneuvered, we got outplanned on their side. They have had this plan to take over the courts for years, and we've seen them pick justice by justice by justice, having a bench of getting folks on the Court of Appeals, starting at districts, who are your Superior Court justices, and we're catching up. But now we've seen that it will take, if we're able to hold Justice Riggs, it will take no less than till 2028 to even be competitive again with our courts. And back to all these judicial cases, it's what legal recourse will you have when we see what's happening with the Supreme Court now. So I don't want to skip over, that is one of those 10, 15-year plans to even get people, for one, to care about judicial races, and just the investment. A lot of the money on their side, they're laser focused on taking over those courts, but it's a part of the national strategy. Same with all the federal packing, but as he's headed out, thank goodness that President Biden did not drop the ball there and really appointed as many federal judges as he possibly could. I think probably the most of any president in a 4-year term, but back in the 2008 timeframe, there are a lot of seats that we left vacant, unfortunately, when folks came in. So just didn't want to skip over long term, that whole judicial piece. We've got to do better. We've got to do better. But go ahead.
So what I wanted to say in response to when somebody, I've been listening to why people would vote for Trump. Because I just can't fathom anybody wanting to. And so I've just been really curious and honestly, openly asked, well, what are the reasons, without being judgmental, because I want to know.
Right.
And mostly people are saying my groceries cost too much. And, it's always the price of eggs. But here's the thing. That's a symptom of what's really wrong. And we need to grab that moment and say, the reason your groceries are costing so much is that for years, the basic real problem is inequity and disparity, this disparity of incomes. That's the real problem. That's why your price of eggs is high. And that's why every election, people are very dissatisfied with their lives, because no matter how hard you work, you still can't meet your basic expenses, pay the rent, buy food, have health care, even at a basic level, buy the medications. And it's that is never fixed. Why? Because income disparity and inequality at every level. So people say, oh, I'll vote for the other guy, and then their lives don't improve. So the next election, vote for the other guy. Historically, that's why we see this blah, blah. And it never fixes what's the real problem. And so in terms of communication, we have to keep repeating exactly what's the real problem: inequality and income disparity, and this is what's causing it, and this is how we fix it. Keep saying the same thing over and over again, very simply. If you say save democracy, people don't know what democracy really means, because we no longer require civics in K-12 education. No, if you say what's democracy to 12 people on the street, you'll get all kinds of answers, because, instead of saying save democracy, say those things that identify what the democracy does for you without using democracy, because nobody really knows what that's mean. Nobody knows what biodiversity means. I'm talking too much, I see. Okay,
We agree,
but
though.
that's a hugely important point I've been wanting to make.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
Point well taken.
Oh, hey, I'm fielding the Zoom questions on the chat, and we got from two people want to know if you're concerned about and can do anything to stop any more Trisha Cotham style defections.
Yeah.
As you may know, in 2022, Trisha Cotham defected from the Democratic Party to the Republican Party and lost us the hold against the supermajority.
What I would say is simply this, without getting into a lot of detail. There are times where you really got to pay attention when people are running for office. And people can tell you a lot when they're running in primaries. And the records can tell you a lot when they're running in primaries. And if you choose to ignore it, then things will happen. And so what I will say is this, is that I still consider Trisha a friend. I mean, she, she made her decision. It said, I respect that decision. That's fine. And she's been reelected as a Republican, and so that's what her district wants. And so, but with that being said, I also was not blind to where her leanings might have been at that time. But, I don't elect her or unelect.
No.
And so, my thing is, I guess the best way I can put it is, I've been in Chatham now 11 years. And the thing that I've always admired about the Chatham voting population is they investigate beyond the letter beyond your name.
Yeah.
Because anybody can go in and file as whoever. And again, I'm not denigrating Trisha at all. And that's what she had traditionally been, and she may have felt that part left. I can't tell you what went into her mindset. But, sometimes even if you still have a letter behind your name, at some point in time, it's clear that you've made a shift in your philosophies. And, I can't really get mad at somebody who openly expresses their philosophies, and if folks choose to ignore that.
Wow.
And, like I said, there are certain things, if I walked in here and said, you guys like, that's and you say it nicely, but you're like, I'm sure we can stand behind that. That's, I appreciate that you think that Lex Luthor should be president, but that's a little different to use to talk. So that's the thing that I'm saying, is that we've really got to be more vigilant there, because that was not, there was no, you can ask anybody that was around me when it happened. I wasn't sitting around like, oh my God, this happened, Natalie? What? I was just like, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And no,
I
I'm not
see
concerned at this time, because the other reason is when that happened, we knew we were going to have another round of redistricting. It's real easy to make a switch when you get ready to change the district anyway, especially if you're switching to the people that are drawing the district.
Yeah.
Well, if you switch now, you better be serious about it, because we know what your districts are. And I would say there aren't a lot of people left that are in districts where it would help them to switch parties and where they can get reelected. So I'm not worried as much about that. What I am worried about, and will continue to be worried about, is a recognition, and this is something I strongly believe. We're a big tent. That is what we're built to be. We have been built on the backs of unions and working class people since the basis of this party was created. Not what it's been called, but the basis of this party was created. This party was created on the backs of abolitionists, of people of that sort, and that's always been a real conglomeration of people, and nobody has ever agreed on everything. But my point is, so what that means is you've also got to be vigilant not to drive people out. Just as you just talked about voters who, there are a lot of voters who voted for Trump this year that you just couldn't believe voted for Trump. And I was just like you, sometimes I'm like, look, I'm not fighting with you about it. I really want to know what switched. And sometimes we make those people switch, and that's what I meant when I said earlier about you got to be careful about being judgmental about people's positions. You got to know why. And sometimes it's simple as not knowing civics. Sometimes it's as simple as they're not connecting some dots. But we've got to be very vigilant about who we send to office and about what their actual positions are, especially if they're being honest about their positions. And I'll just leave it at that, is that there was not a whole lot of deception there. I understand where voters would have felt deceived,
Yeah.
but I am
Okay.
telling you that if the people, there was a lot of detail that I think would have caused a person running with her particular views and background at that time in a primary in certain areas. Like I said, I don't know that she would come out of a primary job down. So there we go.
Yeah. That's amazing.
Just to take it in a slightly different direction, one of the things that we all see are the homeless people at the intersections all over the area. And I'm wondering about what the legislature is thinking about in terms of housing policy that might make a difference in the state. Because housing is obviously something that people are having trouble getting.
Yeah, what a timely, and I should know this, was the point in time count in this county, when did you all do your point in time count? Because they do them all at the same time nationwide, so in Durham, ours was last night. So for folks that don't follow policy, for those that are unhoused, once a year nationwide, within around the same 2 to 3 weeks, you physically go out as a community and do your point in time count if you are unhoused. So I went last night because, to your point, I lived in Durham, as I shared earlier, kind of in the 06, 07 timeframe, went to Asheville, came back around 2011. I have physically seen more encampments than I have ever seen all over. It's a national issue, don't want to gloss over that. Seattle, Atlanta, all these metro areas, you're seeing so many more folks that are unhoused. We talked about inflation. I know you all are feeling it in your insurance bills. You're seeing it. Now I'm gonna step into it in your water bills. I've had a lot of calls about these water bills going up. So you name it. There was a gentleman we talked to last night that has been unhoused for 18 months. He literally has this makeshift shed in the woods with a tarp on top and just never bounced back from COVID. He lost his job. He got sick, doesn't have the support he should have. But it relates to everything we're seeing federally, because the rumor is that, and I hope this is true, particularly with HUD in general, we're hearing, now this is contradictory to some of this freezing of federal grants here, that there will be some block grants that will still just be appropriated. But at the state level, particularly in the Senate or all legislative bodies, a lot of the true work occurs at the committee level. I've always found it to be odd that in the state Senate, we do not have a standing committee on housing. It is very odd.
Wow.
The housing policy kind of goes through local government, then it may make its way over to judiciary and finance. Like there was a bill that, thank goodness, Governor Cooper vetoed, that I fought against too. A lot of folks who are unhoused, you may, be able to work at an address, enough money to stay in a hotel for a few weeks. They're making it harder for you to, or the law passed after we lost the House and Senate, to even claim a hotel as an address. For there are people that short term, that is their home because they have nowhere else to go. They don't have the credit score to get approved for an apartment or for housing. So, or for permanent housing, we don't have enough transitional housing. We don't have enough shelters. So it's a huge complex problem. But I have committed myself to being a lot more vocal about these issues. There are neighbors. I mean, I could go on and on with all the stories I've heard. We know there's connections to mental health issues. We know that everyone doesn't have the family supports, but it becomes also just a community public safety issue of things can happen in these encampments and get out of control really quickly. It could become a public health concern if they're like during COVID, which is why they cleared a lot of them. COVID was spreading. So I think there's more that we can do as a state. There are models in other areas, particularly when it comes to, older motels that we see local governments just purchase and say, this will be the transitional housing. One of the wraparound supports, Wake County, I organized a trip for Durham County leaders to visit Oak City Cares. All the wraparound services are there. You check in, it's a day shelter. The pharmacist is there. If you're a veteran, the VA is there. They have a a HUD voucher program to get you vouchers. There's someone there to help you with mental health.
Wow.
You don't even have to go to the pharmacy. All the medication comes to you. It was a public-private partnership. Shout out to former Auditor Holmes, is very public around. She was unhoused at some point. So when she was Sheriff of Wake County, made it her mission. And I will never forget, and I'm previewing something because I haven't even told her yet. I was struck by when they opened Oak City Cares. I just happened to be there. My good friend works for the VA for the HUD VASH program to have vouchers for homeless veterans. And I remember that at the time, Chairwoman Holmes said, I have a bold vision of ending homelessness in Wake County. And I was like, wow, that's kind of out there. You're saying you're going to end homelessness in Wake County. So I'm going to file a bill in homelessness in North Carolina. And yes, it's aspirational, but if you don't have that goal, it's never going to happen. We have the coalition to end homelessness, but you've got to start there with affordable housing. It's also connected to wages. It's connected to more density, accessory dwelling units, figure out a way to, have more people to live in more areas. It's a lot of different things that we can do. But even states like Virginia, at the state level, they put more money into housing. To put a bow on it, it is one of those issues, depending on who you talk to. There is bipartisan interest. There was something that claimed to be an affordable housing bill that had a little bit of movement last year. It has support from the realtors. Local governments weren't excited about it. I signed on just to be a part of the conversation. We do that plenty of times just to say, I want to be a part of making this bill better. I'm going to co-sponsor it, even though it's not perfect. So there are a number of legislators in the majority that know we've got to do something around housing. So very complex issue. But North Carolina, we're far from where we need to be on housing issues, whether it's, homeless, completely unhoused, affordable, and then just having enough housing stock. We just surpassed 11 million residents in the state. 11 million. So it's only going to get worse, and we've got to really get serious about housing solutions all around.
And I think that I would just add that in order to fix the problem, we got to take it seriously as a problem. And I think that I want to see the same energy towards that we put towards the seniors.
Yes.
Because I mean, look,
What a good idea.
in a day.
Yes.
We moved the
Yes.
abortion bill in 12 hours.
Yep.
We moved a ton of bills in a day. And there are a lot of people who are interested in the problem, and I don't care why they're interested in the problem, in the sense of some people it's a simple money thing and they're just saying, look, this isn't good for me selling real estate in the city because, we've got people out here that are unhoused, but, I'd really like us to take it more seriously. And the reason I say that is because I'll give you an example. So Dare County is suing the state, and I don't know what the status of that lawsuit is. Because Dare County received an appropriation of $35 million for affordable housing. Your question should be, why on earth would a county be mad at the state to the point where it would sue the state for giving them $35 million for affordable housing? Because they read the fine print. The fine print was Dare County couldn't do a thing with that money. They'd already decided who the developer was going to be. They'd already decided that the zoning, they weren't going to be subject to zoning or anything, so they could come and plot some affordable housing right outside in the parking lot, for all intents and purposes, if they own the property. And it's that kind of stuff. And there are plenty more of Dare County situations. And so that's my thing is, don't use it as a guise to continue to abuse government. Take the problem seriously, because, and the other thing we got to do is change the face of the unhoused. Because it's just like we did with Medicaid expansion. When Medicaid expansion started, there was a particular face on Medicaid, and so nobody wanted to expand Medicaid. This gets back to my earlier comment of when did it become so bad it helped people.
Yes.
But then with the unhoused, there's a face on the unhoused that isn't accurate. There are people with full-time jobs that got nowhere to stay.
Yeah.
We passed quickly last year in a bill that made it much easier to evict people. We passed the bill that Natalie was talking about, where you can use hotels as an address. We passed a bill that you couldn't stay in hotels for so long. I mean, we did all kinds of things to make sure to be able to kick people out pretty quickly. But we did nothing to try to figure out how to get them in. And I'm telling you, everybody who is dealing with homes, home builders, realtors, private business, everybody is ready to work with us on a solution. But for whatever reason, you'll find somebody here and there that's interested in the majority party, but again, I know what energy looks like. I know when we want to get something passed, what it looks like. And it looks like a bill hits and it starts moving, and you better start fixing that bill as it's moving because it's getting ready to go. And you have not seen that on the issue of homelessness. You have not seen that on the issue of affordable housing. And again, just like we talked about, you don't have a workforce, you don't raise wages, you don't give people an opportunity to be able to make the money to afford these things. This is really becoming a problem because with 11 million people, the one thing, as my father always said, they're not making any more of is land.
That's
And
the
so
truth.
what happens is, I'll tell you a bill we tried to pass, it's been 3 years ago now. So what happened, this happened in Chatham, and some of you have probably been affected by it. So what problem we're having was foreign investors just coming in and just buying up property. And so then what happens, and I remember a good friend of mine that had to move to the county, got a great job in the county, and I remember him talking, he and his wife were like, they had 2 separate houses. So they were like, well, shoot, we'll sell these houses, we'll be able to buy a mansion in Chatham. They offered $150,000 over the asking price of the house that they wanted, and those people wouldn't even return their call.
Well,
And the reason is because the housing price has gotten artificially run up. I mean, Chatham, at one point in the last 2 years, I don't know if it's still accurate, and man, you might be able to say this, but at one point, we were #1 in the state with average and median home price.
Yeah, we are right now.
Yeah. I'm telling you, isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
I mean, not Wake County, not Mecklenburg County. My point is, but if we're that high, imagine what's going on in all these other smaller counties where they don't have the work base to be able to support it. But the reason we're so high is we're right outside of Wake County. So imagine all these ex-urban counties around Meck, around Guilford. This is a huge problem for people. And so, we've got to take it seriously. So to answer your question, I've not seen serious consideration going towards trying to fix the problem. But it is a huge problem, and it's a scary problem, because again, I can tell you, when you've got people working full-time jobs with kids that are staying in their cars for periods of time, that is a frightening circumstance to me. We at some point, we got to start hearing about it. But thanks for the question.
Along those same lines, we're hearing about, seems like the Democrats have lost the being the party for the working people and working families, working individuals. How do you think it's best for us? What kind of issues do we need to be supporting, and how do we need to be supporting those issues to help you? To make us have that be who we are again? Because that's really what we want. I think we've all wanted that.
I think what I'd love to see is, this goes to the Big Tent thing. Support in this sense. And I've got this, so this is not a complaint for me, but I mean this seriously, like for people who represent some other areas. I see this all the time. Understanding that a person not talking about an issue doesn't mean they don't support an issue. But sometimes you've got to talk about the issue that the folks that are voting care about. And the next coalition, the next great coalition that you're going to see in politics is going to be an economic coalition.
Yes.
And we've got to talk about those economic issues and, get back to, what you were just talking about with the inequity in pay and things that sort. We got to make sure people understand, I don't know the way to put this, but they're getting screwed. It's amazing to me that we've watched a cabinet of 12 billionaires.
Yes. The richest, it's officially the richest cabinet in history.
It's the most ridiculous thing I've seen.
Yeah.
You've got people who used to vote for us.
Yeah.
Who are making money but can't afford a home, that think that those billionaires care about them more than we do. But the reason is because when they hear us talk about issues, we talk about issues that matter, but don't matter to them.
Yes.
Because there's a difference between, do I support an issue if I'm a voter? There's a difference between, do I support an issue and care about it, which I would use Medicaid as an example. I may feel strongly that people should get Medicaid. Will that get me out of my seat to go vote? And what'll get me out of my seat to go vote, it seems for most voters, is are you offering me a chance to make my life better? And we've got to start talking to people about this. It is simple, making the connection for them about higher wages, making the connection for them about reducing prices, making the connection for them that, one of the things I thought we did poorly when inflation was going up is explaining Because companies are
That
making
part.
more money than they've ever made in history.
That part, that part.
They just decided they're gonna do it and our government's not stopping them from doing it.
Exactly.
You know, that is the problem. And it's like, but they just know everything's more expensive and that guy's the president, so he must be the problem.
Mhm.
Because they don't understand the president has no control. But we've got to talk about how are we gonna lower prices? How are we gonna make homes more affordable? How are we gonna make sure that you can make more money so that you can buy more of these goods? Because again, if you're making more money, you don't care the prices of eggs are going up because your income is going up.
Mhm.
And that, you know, because that's the truth about inflation. I mean, right now, you know, the house that cost $30,000 40 years ago, you know, it's probably a $300,000 house now, but it's not that big of a deal if my wages have gone up comparably. And so those are the kind, we've got to keep talking about economic issues. We've got to keep talking about making people's lives better. And we've got to be careful about getting too much into the weeds on, and again, I'm not saying that democracy is not important, because I am telling you, if you ask me what keeps Robert up at night, it is the falling down of a system that has been meant to protect me all of my life, because I'm 54 years old. I know if I was 64 years old, then I would have had a period of time that I had no protections. That is a real thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know what that means. I know that when my father turned 18, he didn't even, you couldn't talk to him about vote because couldn't vote. And that should be shocking to people, but it, you know, people act like that was 400 years ago. I'm like, the people who were supporting those laws then are the ones who are in office right now. Like, those are the ones telling you they missed the good old days and they want to see, you know. I mean, seriously. And so, but that's my thing is that, you know, so that keeps me up at night, but I know that if I go talk to somebody and I say, what I'm worried about is that this abstract person in this abstract situation is going to have abstract problems, I'm not going to necessarily get that vote. But if I come to them and I say, I can make your life better, and here's how.
Mhm.
And you can do that pretty quick.
Yeah, and unfortunately, folks are gonna get an economics lesson really quickly. Gas is going up, eggs are going up with these tariffs issues. Some of it will be because of a virus with, you know, bird flu and things of that nature. So, people are gonna see it. They're gonna say, okay, you lied. You are president and now groceries are even higher than ever. So unfortunately, I do think it will be a gift that we will benefit from in 2 years. I personally think as quickly as 2 years, particularly for these congressional races, people will vote differently. They're already seeing it. But I think also when it comes to the economic issue, so I'm a working senator along with Minority Leader Reives. And so I was full-time on the Harris Walls campaign as political and coalitions director. And something that I'm going to go back to something Robert said earlier, we've got to listen. So with the economics, we heard people saying, I'm going to the grocery store. There was a time where I can take my $20 and maybe have enough to make it through the week. I can't buy much more than bread, eggs, and milk with my $20. We mansplain them. Oh, it's, you know, well, economics and inflation and this and that, instead of meeting people where they are and addressing their pain. Trump will go out there and say, yeah, man, eggs are high. We didn't even own the fact that people were struggling to pay their grocery bills. So yes, from a macroeconomic level, right? I know we're an educated group here. Yes, at a macroeconomic level, the economy was booming. Employment is down, all these things are great. But if inflation is kicking people's butts, even though they maybe wages are higher in some areas, Target, Walmart, you make a whole lot more than you did 5 years ago. But if they don't feel it every day, and we never really address their pain. So back to the listening, really meeting people where they are. And so we looked out of touch and we missed the moment. And we do have to own that. I think of everything with our messaging, not acknowledging people's pain that I heard about. We go into the bank, going to the grocery store, I would just hear it anecdotally. What are you all going to do about these prices? They're out of control. And back to the corporate greed, that populist message that is very powerful. Shout out to Bernie Sanders. I love the Nina Turner example where she would show that Arizona tea that's always $1. She's like, the Arizona tea people have decided they're not going to go up on the price of their tea. It was $1 in 1990, it's $1 today. So using those examples to show corporations do want to make more money. your bag of chips went from this to this to this to this, but it's triple the price. So there are fun ways where we could have broke that down to people. The other thing is when we say working class, what I'm even challenging all of the party with, and please share this with the folks running for chair, what working class people do we listen to? Because they're too broke to run for office. If you are struggling to make ends meet and on public assistance, you don't have the luxury of going to Raleigh every day and serving in the General Assembly because we make a whopping $13,900 a year. So we have to figure out through anecdotally what you hear at the gas station and the grocery store, get out of your bubble, talk to people that are really struggling, use that in our messaging. We have fallen in love, quite frankly, with a consulting class that does not talk to regular everyday people. I have checked my friends on it, my caucus on it, and it's gotta stop. They are making tons of money for messaging that does not relate to average everyday people. And it's gotta stop. The conversations that I'm sure you hear at the barbershop, that has got to impact the mail that people get in their mailboxes. So there's a huge disconnect of just who we're talking to and who's informing us as a party. But what I will admit on the other side of the aisle that they've gotten right, I think people are missing with the Trump and the Elon Musk, the aspirational, right? There is something to the American dream of I can come up with nothing and become a billionaire and a millionaire. What we all know is the 1% is still 1% and that they don't care. We're the ones who care and actually want to help you fully realize the American dream. But they do have a balance of speaking to people's pain while painting this dream. And so I do think that we just kind of have to hit the reset button on all of it. But I can definitely tell you when it comes to the commercials we run and our ads and our digital, we are not listening to regular everyday people. Whoever gets the new DNC spot, they need to do a national listen tour and they need to listen to average everyday people. But overwhelmingly, people just felt like we didn't feel their pain and we just weren't present to what they were really dealing with every day. And that's guys.
I've got to stick one point on that because I'm gonna push back because Natalie is a wonderful human being and she's kind. And I'm older than Natalie. And so we are not going to win in 26 because Trump didn't fulfill his promises. If we don't do the work, you know why?
You have to do the work.
Because when they say you lied, he's gonna be like, well, me, it was the Democrats. I'm not being funny. From 2016 to 2018, you would be shocked how many people thought Democrats were still in control of everything. Republicans had the courts, they had the House, they had the Senate, they had the presidency.
Right.
And there were so many people that you talk to and say, well, you know, this happened. Yeah, that was those are Democrats. And I am telling you that they are going to be lied to because the worst thing that happened in politics, whatever side of the aisle you're on, that everybody's going to admit 20 years from now is the day that we introduce the fact that you could flat out lie to voters.
Yeah.
Voters would not only accept that lie,
But
would run with that lie and elect you into office. So my thing is, you're going to have to keep telling people how they got lied to and why their lies have gotten worse and explain it like that. So that's the only pushback I'll say.
We have one final question here with the microphone, and then I think we should stop and let people go, and if people want to stay for a little bit. These guys are politicians, they will stay with you. But let's just do this final one and then.
I have to mention public health as an economic issue and is something that makes a difference in the K-12 education. And we had Manitowoc before they did, and we have UNC and Duke. What are we doing as a state to make sure we're supporting our access to information in our public health system?
You want to start with that one?
Again, I'm going to give you the old curmudgeon answer, and she's going to give you a nicer answer. It's just like with affordable housing. You got to care and think it's a problem.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you that there is one of the real issues that's going on with government right now, and why the fact that we got the richest cabinet in history and all this stuff. The other thing we've got the richest Congress in history. We've got the richest Senate in history, and that's the only other little thing I would say to what Natalie said earlier about listening to consultants, but we're also listening to those people that are elected because they have no concept of what's going on with folks out here. Because I mean, and I'm not being funny, you know, you look at well, I won't name anybody's name because their followers will come try to beat me up. But there are plenty of people who, and I'm trying to think, there's somebody here locally, and they're not here tonight, but if they were in the audience or if they're listening right now, they know what I'm talking about. They always talk about their elected person, and they said they walked in to Raleigh with a Yugo and walked out with a Maserati. And what I mean is this, so when you're living those lifestyles, you don't have any concept of what's going on. So here's what happens. It's easy to turn down Medicaid when you ran for office to get state health insurance. It's easy to turn down Medicaid when you can afford private insurance, you don't even know that you're paying the $5,000 a month for your private insurance. But when you say these words, which happened at the beginning of COVID, and I've never forgotten it. I can tell you exactly who said it. I'm not gonna say it on the air. I can tell you the representative who said it. I can tell you when I was on the call. I can tell you where I was in my house when I heard it.
Wow.
We were on the weekly DHHS call. I guess at that point it was daily. But Matt Gross was giving us, he was deputy secretary, he was giving us a report on COVID. This is when we first locked down. And the words out of this person's mouth were, why we gotta lock everything down? Because people are dying, people die anyway. Why business has gotta suffer?
Wow.
And that attitude is there a lot more than it should be. We've gotten rid of things. I'll give you an example of something that we got rid of, the Office of Minority Health. I'm not saying that as an African American. I'm saying just like we talked about with DEI and stuff, things that actually help other groups. But we paint a picture that it's only helping one person. The reason that was important is because it went on specific issues that affected specific minority groups. For example, African Americans suffer from sickle cell more than other people. So you do actually have to focus on that. And so, you know, those kind of things, and I'm just telling you, I tell you, I haven't seen any will for affordable housing. I've definitely not seen any will to try to increase public health, which you would think you'd want to, because if people are sick, they can't work, they can't go to school. If they can't work and go to school, they lose their jobs. We spend money on them. So why not proactively spend money on them, make them healthy, give them better lives, longer lives, and let them be productive if you want to be selfish? Yeah, because, you know, I would say morally, does the 5 cent more that you got to pay in taxes actually hurt you to a point where you're fine with 1,000 people not being able to live healthy lives? So that is my monologue on health, but I wish we could do more.
Yeah, and I'm gonna take a little bit of a different approach that's really concerning to me. Ironically, during a legislative conference last year, I had the opportunity to tour the CDC. But what I can say is I was so proud to walk in and see maybe Cohen's portrait on the wall. But then I got really sad. I thought about the people that were gonna come in to bring a wrecking ball to all these federal agencies. And what really concerns me with the public health piece is the public not getting the facts and the figures like we all remember during COVID. Well, to really go back to when COVID started, now it's all coming out. The former or two administrations ago, Trump 1.0, they knew how bad it was. They knew things were airborne, and they didn't tell anybody, and people did die. And hopefully everyone knows the numbers. We lost over 1 million people. So what is really concerning to me of everything we're dealing with now, of the federal and the local kind of all colliding together, is who's going to preserve what is truthful and factual. We believe in science, we believe in facts and figures. And the answer that's going to surprise him, I am dreaming of a world where some of these folks who are appointed actually do not have access to certain things. I am that there are deputies and mid-level folks that say, this is the data, and there's a whole other server of the real information, like that is the world. And I tried to politely ask the question of the CDC. I said, so are there guardrails that just cannot, you know, be eroded? Is there a private group of people that has the real information? So JFK may think that he's doing certain junior, and it's like, actually, all this stuff is over here. Because all jokes aside, a global issue. I mean, you walk into certain rooms of the CDC and it said, this is going on in Rwanda. The UK has an outbreak of measles of over 3,000. This is serious stuff. You know, so even though I'm being facetious, it is nothing to play around with. I mean, you talk about a global epidemic like that, we saw it with COVID. And so of all the things that they're playing around with, That one is really, really horrifying if you have folks that just don't believe in science, they want to lie, they want to hide all this data. I believe that we will have public servants within these spaces that will do what they can. I mean, the World Health Organization, they're still gonna go on. Maybe it's a good thing that we aren't members right now because it would mess it up. Maybe they need to go ahead and preserve.
I agree with that. I agree with that.
Down and let them continue to do what it is that they're gonna do. So that is one where I think, as we saw during the pandemic, where scientists and these doctors, they're still gonna find a way to continue, even if it's properly funded, which I hate that. But I think of all these topics because of the global community, we're just gonna have to dig ourselves out of the hole that will be in federally, and will end with a positive. One of the million reasons why I'm thrilled we have Governor Josh Stein, who knows who would have been our Secretary of DHHS under the alternative. So North Carolina has been on the better side of things because we continue to have leaders at the state level, and not just the secretary, the phenomenal staff we have at DHHS. I mean, I could just list so many. They care, they get it. They've been around a long time. They have that institutional knowledge. So with the state, it would be a lot worse if we didn't have the leaders we needed for health and human services right here in North Carolina. So that is one thing where they need more money and funding and support, but the brains and the knowledge is there.
Thank you.
We have some people who've been watching on Zoom and are feeling as though their voices are not heard. However, it's 8:30, it's hot in here, and the room is packed, so not everybody here got to ask their question or make their comment either. So that's a good problem, but I'm sorry for the people who have been on Zoom. And so we do have one little thing, since we can't. Okay, so now we saw these people.
Y'all gotta give me this link so that my wife doesn't know I was here, because I'm giving these to her. Okay.